You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. Witness testimony and surveillance video was shown today in the Derek Chauvin murder trial in Minneapolis. Of course, it provided the first look at George Floyd's actions inside Cup Foods before his death. It was from inside the store. It shows Floyd casually walking into Cup Foods, roll it please, and talking with customers and employees. We also heard from the store clerk and others who witnessed the murder. Guys, y'all can roll the video. We're going to talk over it. Monique, I want to start with you. You've been following the trial. Just your assessment of what happened today.
The evidence was devastating. The witness testimony was certainly painful to listen to. I've been in trials of my own where I found myself praying for my witnesses that we all would end up making it through and that nobody would collapse on the stand and that I would keep it together and do my job at the table. And I found myself doing that today, even though I'm not there, not in the trial. Even one of the tweets that I tweeted today was help him, Holy Ghost, because when we saw the prosecution's witnesses time after time be racked with guilt and then ultimately just collapse in tears watching the evidence be put before the jury, I can only imagine what the jury's reaction is to these things. But the other thing that I would say is that the prosecution is doing an almost seamless job on presentation of evidence and witnesses and strategy. They pulled the sting today. I'm sure Scott will explain after I'm sorry, I have to cut out early today what that means. But when you know that there's bad evidence that's going to come at some point and you want to control that narrative and present that evidence yourself before anybody else gets a chance to, they started yesterday with what really matters, the relevant evidence about how George Floyd did not need to die. They backed up today. So they went in reverse chronology and explained what happened before he ended up on the ground outside. And then they ended, with the MPD technician coming and all of that body cam footage coming in. And all I was thinking in my head the whole time I was watching that footage is they ought to rot in hell. They ought to rot in hell. They ought to rot in hell. I mean, convictions really are not good enough for what we saw today.
Scott, your assessment.
Yeah, I agree with Monique. The sting they pulled out today, what Monique was talking about, was the store clerk that actually called the police. I actually didn't know there were that many counterfeit bills coming through that community. I mean, it's like this was the second one. But he said he thought that George Floyd was high, although he could have a conversation with him. And he called the police because he had this counterfeit bill. Turns out that George Floyd did have drugs in his system, but that's part of the defense. The prosecution put that witness on today to take the sting out of that, to add credibility to their case, to the jury, saying, this jury, I'm going to give you all the facts, not just some of the facts. I'm not going to hide anything from you. So when you hear this from the defense, you will have heard it already. But the emotional testimony, and it's early, is expected. But what you got today, the power of the testimony was reflected in how the video manifested emotionally with all of these people who observed this. Their helplessness, for one, but more importantly, that they watched the life force being taken away from this black man under the knee of the defendant and the police. And you don't have many videos like that. I've told you before, Roland, the power of this video and why you had protests all over the world was the slowly left, the life force left this man's body and you observed it. It wasn't a gunshot. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't him running and getting shot in the back. No, this 9 minutes was just grueling and awful. And you heard a lot of that on the stand. It's an excellent start for the prosecution, but know the experts are coming and the cause of death is going to be hotly debated and litigated, and that's really going to be the turnkey or the most important part of this case. Who are the experts and who does the jury believe?
Robert.
Was it the drugs and fentanyl and hypertension that killed him, or is it the but for the police the drugs and the health issues don't really matter, because but for the police triggering those ramifications of his health issue, is that what killed him? But for the police. Look for that phraseology as we carry on this trial.
Robert?
You know, there's an odd thing that the defense is doing is a kind of divergent, bifurcated defense. One is this idea of the buck defense, where George Floyd was this 6'5", monstrous, towering individual, athlete, hopped up on drugs, a super soldier, flipping over cars, juggling buildings, all that. And so, of course, it took a small 5'9", very weak officer. We had to hold him down. We had to put our knee on his neck. There was no other way for us to contain him. The buck defense. I've been using it since slavery to talk about black men. But then they have a second defense, which is what Scott was just mentioning, which is kind of an eggshell defense, saying that George Floyd was so sick, so weak, so decrepit, so riddled with drugs that he would have died at that exact same place at that exact same time with no intervention from the officers, that he was a person in such poor physical condition, such poor health, that there was nothing that the officer did that contributed to his death, that it was simply the forces of nature and the officer just happened to be there at that time. So they're arguing in two different directions at the same time. So what you saw the prosecution do today is, as Scott and Monique said, try to take the sting out of that second defense, the sting out of that idea of him simply being so weak and decrepit and riddled with drugs and alcohol that he was going to just keel over and die, taking a culpability away from the officer. I think the next thing they will have to do is attack that buck defense and the idea that he somehow posed a threat, because it's a nonsense argument. And the fact that in America you can have this on video, have a half dozen or more witnesses witness something, talk about this for a year, and still we're on pins and needles as to if there will be a conviction, shows you just how broken the criminal justice system is. God forbid you get killed by the police and you don't have a film crew there with you to chronicle what happened. God forbid you get killed by the police, you don't have an international movement that sparks protests in Sydney, Australia, and Shanghai, China, and everywhere else around the world, because if you're just a regular individual who gets killed by the police, if these officers can't get convicted for this, I'm not sure what you would have to do to get convicted for killing a black man in America.
Folks, we're going to play some of the testimony that took place today in the Derek Chauvin murder trial. Here it is.
I'm going to pause here for a moment. The record should reflect 8/29/55. We saw you standing there with your hands on your head for a while, correct?
Correct.
What was going through your mind during that time period?
Disbelief and guilt.
Okay. Why guilt?
If I would have just not taken the bill, this could have been avoided.
We also saw another individual get pushed by an officer, correct?
Correct.
And what did you do after that happened?
I was just trying to calm him down, tell him to stand back.
Okay, so that takes us to the end of Exhibit 33. You were going back into the store.
Correct.
And so then did you just continue to work your shift?
Correct.
And so did you continue to work at Cup Foods as long as you could?
No.
Why not?
I didn't feel safe.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
I'm not trying to win. I'll get on the ground, anything. I get in the car. He know it. He know it to Mr. Officer. Y'all hear me? Don't do me like that, man. In the car. Okay, can I talk to you, please?
Yes, you get in this car. We can talk.
I am claustrophobic. I'm claustrophobic,
you're not
man.
working with me.
God, I'm claustrophobic, man.
Get in the car.
Man.
Get in the car.
Can you put me in the front? Please.
No, you're not getting in the front.
I'm claustrophobic, Mr. Officer.
Get in the car.
Okay, man, okay? I'm not a bad guy, man.
Get in the car.
I'm not a bad guy. Man. Open my nose. Please, officer. Please.
Sit.
Please.
Take a seat.
Please, man. Please. No, I don't
Take a seat.
I can't choke. I can't breathe, officer. Please. Please.
Fine.
My wrist, man. Please. I can't. And I'm on the ground. I'm on the ground. I'm on the ground. I'm on the ground. I'm going down. I'm going down.
Get in the squad.
I'm going down. I'm not going to lose, man.
Bro, you gonna die of a heart attack, right?
I know I can't breathe.
Get
I can't breathe.
Take a seat.
Please, man. Please listen to me.
Is he going to jail? He's under arrest right now for forgery.
I tell you.
Can we figure out what's going on?
For what? Take him out. For what? Look at you. Thank you. Thank you.
Get him down on the ground. Yeah, on the ground. On the ground.
My God. Right.
You got your restraint. Hobble. On the truck. Okay. I'll grab that. Once you get him.
Jesus Christ. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Thank you.
I can't breathe.
Stop moving.
Mama.
Yeah,
Mama.
it's in the,
Mama.
one of the front pouches.
Mama.
On my right side bag.
Mama.
You're the arrest guy.
All right. Oh my God.
So now you're going to jail.
I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I can't believe this, man.
Can we stop it right here, please?
Mama, look.
Mr. McMahon, do you need a minute?
Oh my.
Take your time. Just know when you're ready. We'll just give you a moment, Mr. McMahon. I'm not sure if there's water as well. Oh, if you need a break to get some water, let me know. We can take a break. May I approach, Your Honor?
You in? Thank you.
You okay?
Yeah.
I know that this is difficult. Can you just explain sort of what you're feeling in this moment?
I feel helpless. I don't have a mama either, but I understand him. My mom died June 25th.
Scott, how does that testimony play to a jury?
Well, it's very emotional testimony for one thing. They took a break right after that. Okay, so the jury is going to be just as emotional as he is. He lost his mother. George Floyd didn't have a mother. And this witness and the other witnesses keep talking about how helpless they felt. And it's true. When the police are there and they got the guy down and you had a paramedic there, they couldn't help but they could see the life force leaving his body. And so his testimony is very powerful. But this case has a lot of different aspects to it. It's going to take like up to 30 days. So this is just one. The prosecutors have to keep that emotional level there for the next 20 or 30 days. We'll see. The real issue, though, with this witness is, could he finish and tell his story? The video tells part of it. What the video also shows with the police and this gentleman here is they just know discretion. They didn't care. And they didn't know how to deal with someone in mental or drug crisis, which is the biggest problem with the police force. There's just nothing there other than arrest and take them. They should have put him in the car and, despite his protest, just took him to the hospital, but they didn't care about it. So good testimony for the prosecution, but he told his story. But can that level of emotional connection with the jury, can they maintain it on a daily basis or weekly basis or through the end of the trial? They're going to try, no matter what, to do just that.
Robert?
Well, it looks good for the prosecution currently, but I've learned not to judge cases at halftime, particularly in the first
exactly.
quarter.
No. We're not saying guilt or innocence. I'm just simply saying, what is it looking like from your perspective? How does that play to a jury right now? Not whether he's going to be guilty.
It plays well to a jury right now, but also there are portions of that I can see the defense will be using in their direct presentment of the facts. They will argue that they tried to peacefully put Mr. Floyd in the backseat of the car, that he resisted, that he pushed back, that they were simply trying to restrain him at the time, that they called for paramedics, that they followed the protocols as were taught to them as required by the department, and that despite the death being tragic, there was no criminality involved. If anything, there was recklessness involved. I think that's what will be their argument. And one of the issues that the prosecution is going to have to establish is the prong of intent, because people keep asking for a first-degree murder charge or conviction in this case. Well, the prosecution has to prove that there was an intent on the part of Officer Chauvin to kill Mr. Floyd, and they haven't presented evidence that would indicate that. And the defense is going to argue that this was just all a horrible accident because of Mr. Floyd's drug addiction, because of Mr. Floyd's alcohol consumption, because of Mr. Floyd's physical condition, and that it's not their fault because he resisted. That's going to be their defense. So I'm going to be looking for the prosecution pushing forward and pushing evidence that will show what the intent was and how they can establish that in this case. So those are things that I'm looking out for.
All right, folks. Let's.
Yeah, Roland, if I may, real quick, one other thing. The police are going to always argue one way, shape, or form. I didn't go there to kill George Floyd. I went there to arrest him. He died as a result of him stealing and resisting, but I didn't kill him. In the end, that's kind of going to be what the defense is going to be in a big way. And with the expert, they're going to argue that in closing. It's going to be a tough case to get a conviction here.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have, you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it. Please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.